All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's segment on talking about undiagnosed, unaddressed depression in the Latinx community. My name is Adriana Alejandre. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and I'm the founder of Latinx Therapy, which is a national directory and a bilingual podcast. So, for today's episode, I'm very excited to be talking with my colleague, Sonia Trefflich. She's a licensed clinical social worker and is a practicing therapist in the state of Nevada, specifically Las Vegas. She is also licensed in California and Texas. Sonia is the founder of Resilient Journey Counseling, which is a private practice that assists adult survivors of childhood trauma. She is certified in EMDR and has a passion for working with those who struggle with thoughts of unworthiness in motherhood, relationships, and also their personal lives. She is a daughter of immigrants, a military spouse, and a trauma survivor. She has a compassionate nature and empathic perspective to healing and thriving. So let's go ahead and bring in Sonia so you all can meet her and we can get started on this conversation. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So this series, I just introduced you to everyone, but I haven't told the audience that this series is actually in memory of my mother, who I recently lost in September. I decided to launch this series of themes that are connected to her life because I do find that these are common experiences within our cultura, within our immigrant parents, and we do have to talk about them more. I wish that my mom had access to this information growing up. I wish that she knew the signs of depression and all of these other topics that, are included in this series. So that's the reason, everybody, for why we are having these discussions. And I also couldn't emotionally have these discussions during Latinx Heritage Month. So, Sonia, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And for everybody that is watching as well, for being here and for all your support.
Thank you. And I didn't know that that was the reason for this. So thank you. I'm honored that I have this opportunity to share this message.
Thank you. Yes. So maybe we could go ahead and get started with what is depression? How is it seen? What is depression in our community?
So a lot of times in the Latinx community, we see depression, or the first thing that typically comes up into people's minds, or when they see somebody that's depressed, is maybe they're isolating themselves, or maybe they're crying a lot, or maybe they don't want to engage with others as usual. They're just feeling really down. You could just tell there's something really off about them. And a lot of times, in some cases, people say things like, I don't want to live. What's the point of life? They really start, unfortunately, going down that rabbit hole as well, where they're having those signs of suicidality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's something in our culture that we think that because if we avoid talking about suicide, then it's not going to happen. It's not going to be something that is planted in their mind as an option, but it actually does the opposite effect where it's something that we have to talk about. Now, this segment for today is not going to focus on suicidality, suicide ideation, but we cannot separate it also from depression when we talk about it. And I missed also after your intro talking about why we're having this, and that's because depression does go unaddressed, right? It isn't treated due to the stigma, as we all know, due to the barriers to treatment. Accessibility is a big issue as to why our community can't get help. Some people want it, but they just don't have access to it, whether that's because of a language barrier, finances, living in a rural right? Community, so having tech issues. There are many different issues across the nation and even globally, systemically, as to why there is a barrier to treatment. And then within our community, it's also possible to be misdiagnosed, to be told you have anxiety when it's actually maybe depression or even bipolar disorder, which is, it is about depression. So I definitely wanted to mention that. Um, you shared with us, Sonia, about some depression signs and symptoms. Are there any others that you would like for our community to be aware of?
Yes. Um, this is a big one. As I was thinking about this topic last night, I thought the way that I personally witnessed depression a lot in my family was angry outbursts. We don't
Mm,
typically think of depression and anger, but they
yeah.
actually go really hand in hand. And so people who are irritable, who are frustrated um, in even or small matters, perhaps they have sleep issues. This is a big one. People tend to, as you say, misinterpret, oh, the lack of sleep because I'm really anxious. But loss of sleep can also be attributed to depression. And when I mean loss of sleep issues, meaning the person is sleeping too much. So, parents or, adult children with parents who are sleeping too much, or somebody who feels, oh, I can never sleep. Like maybe if I do 2 to 3 hours, that's good. That could be one of the signs. Um, so somebody who has a loss of appetite, their appetite really reduces, or they have an increased cravings for food. Um, Maybe they're feeling really unworthy. They're having really low self esteem. Lately, maybe they say things, disparaging things about themselves, like, I'm just not really good at this, or I've noticed that I'm really failing at life. Um, and the one of the things with depression that I've noticed with individuals that I work with is, uh, they tend to say things like, I'm really failing at everything, or everything in my, like a lot of all or nothing statements like that, or I I just don't find the meaning of life. Like, I'm just so bored all the time. Could be some of the things they say. They just don't find interest in anything that they do. So that's important to note as well.
Yeah, yeah, there's that internal dialogue, right? That is very against themselves. It is like we hear, you are your worst critic, but that voice echoes really loudly within, and it can even cause some social disruption, which that can look like isolating yourself from others or even activities that you have enjoyed, as you mentioned. So we also want to mention that all of these things that Sonia and I are talking about are very subjective. They look differently for everybody. So all of these signs that you're hearing about don't have to all come together. They can show up differently in everybody, and they can show up also at different times individually. So I think, formally, systemically, to be diagnosed, you have to have a certain number of signs and the symptoms, rather, as they say, for a minimum of 6 months, right? In order to be formally diagnosed, whether that's for medication. You don't need to be diagnosed to receive treatment, to get therapy. You can, if you're concerned about any changes, any of these signs that you're hearing about, you can start therapy because you're concerned for that. Nobody needs a diagnosis to enter therapy, and I think that's the beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Other signs I wanted to mention that I have, not that I have or I diagnosed my mom, but I do believe, just as her daughter, that I saw a lot of signs of depression. When we were looking over the pictures of what we had for her funeral services before I was born, I noticed how, like her smile, how she would smile before a lot, and then when, we started, myself being born, like there was a change in her smile. She wasn't smiling anymore in any of her pictures as she got older and older and older. And not to say that that's necessarily like a clinical sign or anything like that, but that just goes to support what I had observed, in that because, our immigrant parents come here to reach this American dream, there's this push economically to hustle and to work because you have to sustain life. And I think that definitely contributed to, and contributes continuously, this financial stress to a lot of people's depression, um, and feelings. It's just such a different lifestyle living here compared to what they have back in their home country, which is more, more time with family versus more time with work. Um, and so, yeah, I wanted to mention that that's something that I noticed, along with that irritability that you were talking about, which is something that we as clinicians often look for in teen clients, because they're not going to articulate, "I'm feeling depressed. I am depressed." Right? It's usually through behaviors. And I think that that goes with a lot of our community, older community members too, that don't have the language of feeling words. That is a skill set that is actually learned. And because of the stigma, we don't grow up talking about our feelings, so we can't identify them as adults.
Right. A smile is um, part of our body language.
Hmm.
And so when you talk about one of the ways that we can notice people, the signs that you can't really just, verbalize, the body tells us a lot about how we're feeling. In fact, one of the symptoms of depression can be unexplained physical problems, such
Yes.
as back pain or headaches.
Yeah.
If you know, we're trained as clinicians to read the body. So a lot of times, sometimes people don't even know when they come into my office, they don't say, and they're adults,
Mhm.
they don't say I'm depressed. I
Right.
could just tell they're a little hunched over. Maybe they won't even look at me. They just look down. They definitely are not smiling. A lot of times, depending on how much the depression has overcome and overtaken their life, it's very evident with their body without them saying, "Hey, everyone, I have depression." And a lot of times, as you said, people don't realize that it's depression.
Hmm.
From my experience working with the immigrant community and children and adults alike, they don't necessarily know what their pain is, and they don't know, perhaps they're overcome with grief, which then leads into depression. As you said, community and support is so important for all of us. And the immigrant experience, unfortunately, is the detachment. It's that separation, which absolutely kicks in the grief and loss process, which then here comes depression. And a lot of times, this is one of the things that I thought I really need people to understand, that depression, one of the ways that I explain depression to people, a very simple term is, depression is your body telling you something is wrong. It's a sign. It's telling you to do something about it. And sometimes in very subtle ways that we don't even realize that it's giving us that sign, but it is.
Yeah. Our body speaks volumes. And I think we're so used to using it as a vessel, right? To just get us through, this experience, from one moment to another. And, depression sometimes isn't alone. Like, there's, as you mentioned, it comes with grief. It could come from trauma, with anxiety, from anxiety. There's no causation typically, but what I'm trying to say is that because, our community has a lot of intergenerational traumas, it's possible that we numb our bodies through these difficult experiences and hardships in life, and aren't able to feel the aches about many, I want to say like maybe 80% of the people, Latinx folks that I have seen as a therapist, and I've been practicing since 2015, it's been very difficult for folks to identify and build the skill of attuning to their body. Um, we have that book right in our field, The Body Keeps Score. And yes, it does. There are lived experiences that if we do not process it in our body, it's going to show up. It's going to live there, and it's going to be manifesting into something else, and go into that pocket of depression. Another thing that you had mentioned was that our community and culture doesn't recognize, right, depression when it's showing up. And I also want to add that I think many people in our community, maybe like ourselves too, Sonia, I know I can relate to this personally, is that some of us may be able to function through it. And I think historically, we've seen maybe through the media depression to be as something that weighs us down and we're unable to move and we're crying all the time. But that's not the case. Depression, again, can be seen so differently. And people like my mom she went into working, a lot. And when she would get home from her graveyard shift, she'd go to her garden. And it's because there was all this energy, I would imagine. I witnessed this. So I think, students, first gen college students, right? Experience the highest levels of depression. Ages 18 to 24 are the most vulnerable. And across many different surveys and studies, their stats are really, really high. And I think that it comes from that, suppression of emotion, expression, and not having the coping skills, because mental health is, for many of us, discovered in early adulthood, those ages. So I think, I would like for folks listening to this and sharing who choose to share this information, to know that depression, just because you see someone that's not crying anymore after they've told you that they're not depressed, or maybe returning to work, or maybe returning to their chores, it doesn't mean that they're well. Um, Yet, they still need support. It doesn't mean that they were being lazy, which is also how depression is seen. Depression is seen culturally as an excuse in our community, but it is genetic, it is situational, and it impacts us for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. And if you address depression, contrary to what our paradigms and models that come from colonization, if
Mhm.
we address our depression, we are not weak. In fact, most of the clients that I've met are so courageous because they have the guts to stand up to all these paradigms, all these beliefs, all of these ideas that their parents, grandparents thought that they had to continue to hustle, and that their needs, their depression was not
Mhm.
important. And so it takes a lot of courage to face it, to address it, to deal with it, because you can't wish depression away. You can't take even a magic pill and it'll just magically go away, even with medication.
That's true.
There, according to research, it's the medication and the psychotherapy that
Mhm.
yield better results for people. And so a lot of times you see somebody who's depressed and there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of stories to be told that need to be heard. And so if you address it, it's going to get a little better, as opposed to pretending it's not there. And it's almost like this monster that gets bigger and bigger for people. And even though right now I'm not crying and I'm doing a really good job at masking how I feel, because we could be really good at that in our culture and our community. We throw ourselves at work and we think it's going to go away if I work 10, 14 hours, 16-hour days, but it won't. That's not how this works. What it will do, it will unfortunately destroy our lives and create so much more chaos than we anticipated, as opposed to just nipping it in the bud and really taking care of our needs, which is one of the hardest things we can do in our community.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. And I know that people that are watching us live right now are resonating. Sonia, we have a very common question that we're being asked, when we talk about this, and it's how can we share with our parents that we're noticing that they may be depressed or that they may benefit from seeking help? What language would you recommend using?
I would recommend using the language of compassion. Our parents, there's these roles that kind of get switched at times, right? When we become the caring adult as adult children. And there's some pride in there culturally that the parents are supposed to know what they're doing and they're supposed to be able to handle things. But being
Yeah.
able to come at it with compassion is going to be very important from a place of caring. Like, I care so much about you and I just want to see you happy. And there's people out there, like mental health therapists, that we are in this field because we want to change things. We want to transform how people live their lives. Really, we're talking about mental health, but this is really about how people live their lives. We deserve to live lives that are healthy. And so if you come at it with compassion, I think it would be such a big difference as opposed to condescending or even, a very Eurocentric way of, well, I believe you have depression. And it's more of, hey, I'm noticing you're sad. I really care about you. Can you let me help you? Can I help you? I think you'd really benefit from this, but take your time. I'm always going to be here. As opposed to, well, I try to help you and you don't want to listen. And well, you know,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I think with depression, it's important to also ask, how can I be of support? And it's okay if they don't have an answer. I think it's always about kind of that checking in, like, hey, if I'm doing something that's bothering you, just let me know. Like, if let's say you want to help clean the room, like, if this isn't the time, I can come back. I'll try again in 2 hours. Again, everybody's depression is so different. I've worked with clients that are unable to speak during depression. They can't even give eye contact. Their body language is so closed off and they're very, very tired. You don't have to be doing anything like exercise or moving around to be tired when you have depression. Everything internally is on overdrive. And so people are going to be naturally tired because of the depression. Whereas other people are on the go, 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 right? And they're functioning from what it seems like on the outside with their depression. But again, like there's this saying, right, that we've all heard, I'm sure. Check in on your strong friends, check in on your strong family members. Like everybody needs that support. We don't know who is struggling with depression and who is not, and we don't even need to know. But if you are concerned, yesterday I was on the Instagram live talking about hoarding with Cristal Acosta, LPC from Texas, and she suggested, right, if someone is concerned about someone's hoarding, to use that compassion, as you're mentioning, Sonia, and the statement starting with, I care about you, right? I care about you, and I'm feeling concerned about how maybe you're not spending time with doing your regular activities. Would you like to talk? Or can we go for a walk? Or just anything that, is peaceful and non-confrontational is going to be helpful in this setting. And sometimes silence is excellent. Just being an ear, again, like Sonia said, not lecturing, not placing blame or shame. It is not the time. No advice unless they are asking for advice, because that weighs people down even more and it causes regressions emotionally. Yeah.
absolutely. So I heard we need to connect first with the
Mm-hmm.
person. And there's different ways to connect to people in very simple ways. And the simple, most powerful way is, as you said, holding space for them, not
Yeah.
saying anything, just saying, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Absolutely. So, as we're winding down, Sonia, I think we addressed the question of why immigrant communities stigmatize therapy and depression. But is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Um, I got the opportunity to work at a clinic in Boyle Heights, and I was there for a few years. I was there during my internship, and then a few years after that, I worked in a very similar setting in San Antonio, Texas. And one of the things that, and as an immigrant, I could say, we deserve more. And
Hmm.
I want people to hear that, and I want people to tell their family members, we deserve more. We work so hard. We are such hard workers, hustlers. I mean, and then we go home, and in some ways that's our safe haven, that's our safe place for a lot of us, or at least I would hope so. And remembering that there's a lot of us in the community that want to see you get better, that are here, and I'm going to just speak for myself. One of my purposes is to spread this awareness and to really normalize getting help, um, because we wouldn't, just as we've normalized working and hustling, we need to
Hmm.
also normalize getting help, right? We don't
Yeah.
question going to the doctor. This is similar because we deserve better.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time and it's okay. Um, but I myself, my philosophy is that this can't be done alone. And it's really important to learn how to ask for help. So if you yourself are also struggling, right? Your family struggling. And I know firsthand that when I see my family struggle, I want to help them first, even though I may be struggling. But I've learned over time that I have to help myself first, fill up my cup, and then I'll be a better resource for those around me. So, for those of you watching, if that resonates, if you are struggling yourself and you are not expressing it, I highly recommend talking to somebody that you trust and and giving yourself that chance to get the help in any way. It could be from a friend. I need someone to hear me out. I have been struggling for some time and I'm not sure what to do, but I'm sharing this so that I can feel a little bit seen, right? So that's my message. And Sonia, to conclude, what resources would you recommend?
Um, first, first of all, the Latinx directory, and Adriana does so much for the community. I would recommend, if somebody doesn't know where to start there. There are quite a few clinics in most of the urban communities, and even in some of the rural, where people can access mental health. Ask your doctors, if anything, if you don't know who to talk to, ask your doctor, ask any nurse that you meet with. I know that there's a crises number, a national number that can also give resources. But just just ask for help. And I just wanted to quickly add, if you right now who are watching want to help a family member, and maybe you've mentioned it to them and they're just not ready, one of the best ways that you can help them is by modeling what we're speaking about today. So get yourself help, because they're going to see how much better you are doing, and then they're going to realize maybe it is not so bad to get some help, and they'll see by your example, maybe if they're not ready right now to reach out for help.
Yeah, that's great to include. I want to add that typically there are nonprofits across the nation in your state that have grants and that help people do, like, the grant can be specified. We are helping victims of crime, people that have experienced any trauma, even if it's not recently, if it's childhood. We are helping LGBTQ folks. We are helping, single moms, farm workers. There's grants that are specified, but unfortunately, it is going to take some research from you. There are also universities, especially if you are in a bigger state, there are universities that conduct research, and typically within their psychology department, they offer free services or super low cost in exchange for you to be reporting your symptoms. It's all anonymously typically. So that's also another avenue for low cost or free services. And you can always ask folks in our directory, if you see the rate and you can't afford that rate of a clinician that you are a good fit for, or you believe you are, then you can ask them what their sliding scale is and who is eligible for their sliding scale slots, and go from there. And if you have insurance, it's recommended to call the back of your insurance card to get a list of providers, and you can ask them for, typically they categorize it as Latino versus Latinx, unfortunately, but Latino therapist or Hispanic therapist. If they don't have that, you can ask for Spanish-speaking therapist and do research from that list. So those are the resources that I have, and I would encourage people to also seek support groups, whether you are a loved one or yourself are struggling. You can go with your loved one who is struggling with depression also to some of the support groups if they allow it. So that would be my recommendation. And always ask us for resources. We are happy to be of service for you all as well. Yeah. So Sonia, thank you so much for being here. Please share with us where people can find you.
So you all can find me at Instagram at Resilient Journey Counseling, or on my website, aresilientjourney.com.
All right. All right. Thank you again very, very much, Sonia. And I hope this conversation was helpful for folks. Please check out the descriptions, and you can leave us a comment to ask if you need certain resources, and I'll be happy to help. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye.